Imagine, for a moment, walking through a peaceful cemetery on a quiet afternoon. The air is still, the only sound being the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. You pass rows of graves, some old, some new, each marking a life once lived, a soul now at rest. But suddenly, out of nowhere, a loud and jarring noise shatters the calm. You turn to see a group of teenagers laughing, throwing trash onto a military grave, mocking the very symbol of sacrifice that it represents. You can't believe what you're seeing. How could anyone disrespect the sacred resting place of a fallen hero, someone who gave everything for this country? You're left stunned and speechless, torn between anger and disbelief. But here's the kicker. The story doesn't end there. Because right as you feel the rage building up inside, a stranger, someone you would least expect, steps forward, and what they do next changes everything. Trust me, you're not going to believe what happens next. You're going to want to stay with me till the end to see how this story unfolds and what happens when respect is demanded in the most unforgettable way. Now, let's take a step back and put this into perspective. In a world where disrespect often seems to be more common than honor, it's easy to believe that these kinds of situations are just the new normal. Teenagers acting out, disregarding anything that remotely resembles respect. It's the kind of thing we see too often, right? But there are moments, rare moments, when things don't go as expected, when one person, one action, can flip the script entirely. This is one of those moments. As we dive deeper into this story, I want you to put yourself in the shoes of the people involved. Picture it for a second. The teenagers, carefree, laughing, and tossing their trash onto a grave that means more than they could possibly understand. And then, picture the man, the stranger, standing nearby. At first glance, he seems like just another passerby, someone who might just keep walking, someone who might not want to get involved. After all, it's easier to walk away, right? Easier to mind your own business when confronted with something you can't believe. But here's the thing about this man, he's not like everyone else. And as the teenagers continue their disrespectful actions, something inside him shifts. It's as if a switch flips, and he knows what he has to do. But what comes next? What action could possibly be enough to restore the honor of the fallen? Could one man, one act, make a difference in a world that sometimes seems to have lost its sense of decency? This is where you, the viewer, come in. I want you to think about what you would do in this situation. Would you stay silent? Would you watch and shake your head, feeling powerless? Or would you step up and make a stand, no matter the cost? As the tension builds, the scene before you becomes increasingly charged. The stranger's response to these teens is more than just an act of revenge. It's a moment that forces us all to question our own sense of right and wrong, our own willingness to defend the principles that this country was built on. As we continue down this path, let me ask you, what would you do if you saw someone disrespecting the graves of military heroes, those who gave their lives for the very freedoms we often take for granted? Would you just watch? Or would you rise to the occasion? Would you fight for something greater than yourself, even if it meant standing alone? The answer to these questions might surprise you, just like the one you're about to hear. Because when this stranger steps forward, you're going to see something that will restore your faith in the power of one person to make a monumental difference. But here's the real question. How will the teenagers respond? How will they react when they realize the full weight of what they've done? Will they apologize? Or will they double down on their careless actions? And what's going to happen when this stranger makes his move? Will it be enough to turn the tide, to make these teenagers understand the consequences of their actions? You don't want to miss this, because the answer is more powerful than anything you could have imagined. Keep watching, because the moment of truth is coming, and it's going to leave you speechless. I know you're wondering what happens next. You can feel the anticipation building inside you, and you're eager to see how this story plays out. Don't go anywhere, because in just a moment, everything is about to change. Stick around, because you're about to witness an unforgettable act of courage, one that will not only redefine the meaning of respect, but also remind us all of the power of standing up for what's right, no matter the odds. As the stranger stood there, watching the scene unfold, his mind raced. For a moment, he seemed almost lost in the wind, the rustling of the leaves, and the distant hum of traffic beyond the cemetery gates. The world around him felt suspended in time, and for reasons he couldn't quite place, he felt a deep, unsettling sense of duty rise within him. What was it that had brought him here, to this exact spot, at this exact moment? He wasn't the type of person who typically sought out confrontation, especially not over something as trivial as a few careless teenagers and their disrespect. Yet, something about this moment felt different. The military grave the teens were mocking, there was something about it that seemed to call to him. Maybe it was the weathered headstone, the faded American flag flapping against the wind, or the name etched in stone, Sergeant James C. Thompson. A name he didn't recognize, but somehow, in the depths of his gut, he felt it meant something. It meant everything. The stranger hadn't planned on coming to the cemetery today. It wasn't part of his usual routine. He had just finished a long day at work, tired, exhausted, the kind of mental fatigue that makes you question whether you should even bother getting out of bed in the morning. His mind had been elsewhere, mulling over problems at home, unresolved tensions with family members, and a lingering sense of isolation that had been creeping into his life over the past few months. Divorce had hit him harder than he liked to admit. The constant bickering, the weight of losing the one person who had meant everything to him, had left scars. Every corner of his apartment seemed to echo with her absence. And though his friends tried to comfort him, offering words of encouragement, nothing could fill the void she had left behind. Maybe that was why he took such a long walk today. Maybe that was why he ended up here, in this cemetery, staring at a group of teenagers who had no idea just how much their actions were about to shift the course of their lives. He had seen them before, those same teens, hanging out at the corner store by his apartment, the ones with the arrogant swagger, the laughter that was louder than it needed to be, and the look in their eyes that suggested they were untouchable. It wasn't the first time he had noticed their disregard for the world around them. He had seen them drop trash on the sidewalk, yell at passing strangers, and disrespect their elders. But he had never once intervened. He had always been the kind of person who preferred to keep his distance, to not make waves. Life was complicated enough without adding the mess of other people's problems into the mix. But today something felt different. As the stranger stood there, silently observing, he couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was a test. Perhaps not a test of his courage, but of his character. Could he stand by and do nothing? Or would he, for once in his life, be the person who rose to the occasion? But then, his mind wandered again, casting doubt on his own judgment. Maybe he was overthinking it. Maybe he was imagining some grand moral battle that wasn't even there. Maybe those teens didn't deserve his intervention at all. After all, they were just kids, right? Kids make mistakes. Maybe they didn't know any better. It wasn't his job to teach them a lesson, was it? And yet, the longer he watched them, the more it gnawed at him. His thoughts began to flicker, like a film reel malfunctioning, jarring flashes of memories from his own past, moments that still haunted him. He remembered a time when he had looked away, when he had chosen not to get involved, and the consequences had been far worse than he ever could have imagined. That feeling of regret, of not having done something when you had the chance. He knew that feeling all too well. And the thought of letting this moment slip away without doing something gnawed at him, almost painfully. Suddenly, one of the teenagers, a tall boy with messy hair and a smug grin, tossed another piece of trash onto the grave. The sound of it hitting the headstone echoed in the quiet space, and it felt like a slap in the face. The other kids laughed louder, one of them even imitating a soldier's voice in a mocking tone. It was too much for the stranger to bear. He stepped forward, his footsteps deliberately slow, each one drawing him closer to the group of teenagers. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, his heart rate picking up. His thoughts scrambled, as if trying to find a way out, but there was no turning back now. But just before he could reach them, he noticed something strange. A woman standing off to the side of the cemetery, just out of the corner of his eye. She was dressed in black, her posture straight and stiff, as if she were waiting for something, watching with an intensity that seemed out of place in such a serene location. Her presence unsettled him, and for a moment, he wondered if she had been watching the teenagers as well. Was she waiting to intervene? Was she connected to the grave somehow? His mind swirled with questions. He couldn't take his eyes off her, Even as he moved forward, his gaze darting back and forth between the woman and the group of teenagers. Something didn't feel right. Who was she? And why was she here, on this day, at this exact moment? Was she part of the story, or was she just another random witness to this unfolding drama? The tension built, each second feeling like an eternity. The woman never moved, her eyes never leaving the scene. But what caught the stranger's attention even more was the faint flicker of something in her hand. It was too far to make out clearly, but there was definitely something there, something metallic, glinting in the sun. Was it a phone? A camera? Or something else entirely? As the group of teens laughed and continued to mock the grave, oblivious to the stranger's approach, the woman's presence loomed larger in his mind. Was she a witness, or something more? Was there more to this day than he could see? And then, just as he was about to reach the teens, he heard a faint sound. A whisper, almost too quiet to hear, but unmistakable. "You don't know what you're doing." He froze. The hairs on the back of his neck stood up. The voice was soft, but the words were clear.
Who had spoken them?
Had it been the woman? Or had it come from somewhere else entirely? The stranger's mind raced as he tried to process what he had just heard. What did it mean? Why did it feel like there was something he was missing, something that was just out of reach? Was this more than just a simple act of disrespect? And who was that woman? There was only one way to find out. The stranger's mind raced as he took another step toward the teens, his heartbeat echoing in his ears. The woman with a metallic object in her hand seemed to be watching him now, her gaze steady, unnerving. Was she trying to warn him about something? Was she part of this bizarre situation in some way, or was it simply a coincidence that she was here, just when he was about to act? But he couldn't focus on her for too long. His attention had to be on the group of teens. They had crossed a line, and he was determined to make them understand the weight of what they had done. As he moved closer, he prepared himself to speak, his voice steady but firm, ready to demand respect for the fallen. But just as he was about to confront them, a sudden sound, faint but unmistakable, made him stop dead in his tracks. A rustling, as if someone was moving quickly behind him. His instincts kicked in. The hairs on the back of his neck prickled, and his eyes darted over his shoulder. The woman was gone. The spot where she had been standing was now empty, as if she had vanished into thin air. For a split second, his mind tried to make sense of it. She couldn't have just disappeared. Had she been following him? Had he imagined the glint in her hand, or was it something more, something connected to the strange atmosphere that had taken over the cemetery? His thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a voice from behind him. "You don't want to get involved, trust me." The voice was low, urgent, and distinctly male. He turned around quickly, startled, to see a man standing there, someone he didn't recognize. The man was tall, wearing dark sunglasses despite the overcast sky, and his presence felt out of place, almost as if he had materialized out of nowhere. He had the look of someone who was used to moving in the shadows, someone who didn't want to be seen or remembered. His eyes locked onto the stranger's, and for a moment, the air between them seemed to hum with unspoken tension. "I'm not sure what you're talking about," the stranger replied, trying to keep his voice even. But inside, doubt started to creep in. Who was this man? Why had he spoken with such urgency, as if he knew something the stranger didn't? The man didn't answer immediately. Instead, he took a few steps forward, glancing at the group of teens, still throwing trash and laughing without a care in the world. The stranger's eyes followed the man's gaze, and that's when he noticed something else. One of the teens, a girl with dark hair and a ripped denim jacket, was holding something in her hand, something shiny. It looked like a camera. And from the way she was holding it, it seemed like she wasn't just recording the incident, she was documenting it, as if she was trying to capture something beyond the moment, something important. The stranger took a step forward, his pulse quickening. Could she be involved in something more than just a prank? Was this part of a bigger story? But as he made his move toward her, the man blocked his path, stepping directly in front of him. "Let it go," the man said, his voice almost a whisper now. "You don't want to know what happens if you dig any deeper. Trust me. Some things are better left alone." The stranger paused, his mind whirling. Was this some kind of warning? Or was the man trying to cover something up? His gut told him something was off. This wasn't just a random encounter. The man had been too calm, too deliberate, and the words he spoke weren't just a casual caution. They felt like a veiled threat. But before the stranger could respond, a commotion broke out behind him. One of the teens, a skinny boy with messy hair, had noticed him standing there and was now pointing in his direction, shouting, "Hey, what's your problem, man?" The rest of the group turned to look, their faces twisted with annoyance. The tension in the air thickened, and for a brief moment, everything seemed to hang in the balance. The stranger could feel his heart pounding in his chest, the adrenaline coursing through him as he weighed his options. But just as quickly as it had started, the confrontation was interrupted by a loud sound, a car door slamming shut, followed by the roar of an engine. The group of teens scattered, some running, others taking off in different directions. The stranger glanced over his shoulder just in time to see a black SUV speed away, its tinted windows hiding the face of the driver. The stranger felt a chill run down his spine. Who was that? And why had the SUV shown up at exactly the moment he was about to confront the teens? Was the man in sunglasses involved with whoever was in the SUV? And why did he feel like the mystery was just getting started, like he was on the edge of uncovering something much darker than he had anticipated? As the last of the teens disappeared into the distance, the stranger turned back toward the grave. He was so close to uncovering the truth about what was really going on. But just as he stepped forward, his foot struck something in the dirt. He knelt down, his fingers brushing against the object buried beneath the soil. It was a small, silver keychain, a military dog tag, but not just any dog tag. This one was different. It was old, worn, and had a number etched into it that didn't belong to any soldier he knew. It wasn't just a piece of forgotten memorabilia. It was a clue, a key to something much bigger. But as his fingers closed around it, a sharp voice broke through the silence. "Leave it," the man from earlier warned again, his voice coming from somewhere behind him. The stranger turned to face him, but before he could speak, the man was gone. Vanished, as if he had never been there at all. The keychain in his hand felt heavier now, more significant. It was no longer just a random object. It was a piece of the puzzle. But what was it connected to? Why had it been left here, buried near the grave? Was it a sign that the teens hadn't been the only ones disrespecting the grave? Or was there something more to this whole situation than he realized? The stranger stood there for a moment, staring at the keychain in his hand, the weight of the mystery pressing down on him. The pieces weren't fitting together. The threats, the strange woman, the sudden appearance of the SUV, and now the dog tag. What was going on here? And who could he trust? Just as he was about to turn and head out of the cemetery, determined to get to the bottom of this, a distant sound stopped him in his tracks. A voice, echoing from somewhere behind the trees, soft but unmistakable. "You're asking the wrong questions." His heart skipped a beat. The voice that had echoed from behind the trees lingered in the stranger's mind, its words hanging in the air like a silent threat. "You're asking the wrong questions." He froze, feeling his breath catch in his chest. Who had spoken those words? Had it been the same man in the sunglasses? Or was it someone else? Someone lurking in the shadows, pulling the strings of this twisted game? His eyes scanned the area, but the trees remained still, the only movement coming from the breeze that rustled the leaves. It was as though the cemetery itself had become a silent witness, holding its breath, waiting for him to make the next move. But before he could make sense of the message, his phone buzzed in his pocket, cutting through the tension like a sharp knife. He pulled it out, glancing at the screen. It was a text from his ex-wife, Rachel. He hadn't heard from her in weeks, not since the divorce was finalized. Her message was brief, but it sent a chill down his spine. "I need to talk. It's about James." James. The name hit him like a jolt of electricity. James was their son, their only child. He was staying with Rachel for the weekend, but why was she bringing him up now? What could she possibly want to talk about that had anything to do with James? The text seemed urgent, desperate even. Was this connected to the events unfolding in the cemetery? Or was it just another part of the tangled mess his life had become? Without thinking, the stranger stepped away from the grave and headed towards the exit of the cemetery, his mind racing. He needed to know what Rachel wanted, to understand why she had sent such an alarming message. But as he made his way through the rows of gravestones, the weight of the keychain in his pocket seemed to grow heavier with each step, as if it were calling him back to the mystery he had started to uncover. His fingers brushed against it, the cold metal a constant reminder that something was off, something deeper than just a few disrespectful teens. When he reached his car and pulled out of the cemetery, his thoughts were split in two. On one hand, he was desperate to find answers about what had happened today, to piece together the fragments of the strange events he had witnessed. But on the other hand, the pull to understand Rachel's message, to see if James was somehow involved, was growing stronger. Could the two situations be connected? Could the mysterious warning, the sudden appearance of the black SUV, and the keychain all point to something involving his son? He couldn't shake the feeling that there was something he was missing, a connection that was slipping through his fingers, just out of reach. He tried calling Rachel, but the line went straight to voicemail. His thoughts spiraled, and as he drove through the quiet streets, the world around him seemed to blur. What if James was in danger? What if this wasn't just some random series of events, but something more sinister, something that involved people he knew and trusted? He had to know. As he reached his apartment, he was about to grab his phone to text Rachel again, when the doorbell rang. He hesitated, confused. Who could be at his door this time of night? His heart raced as he approached, his mind still reeling from everything that had happened earlier. When he opened the door, he was met with an unexpected sight. It was a man, tall, with graying hair and a serious expression. The stranger's stomach twisted. He recognized him. It was Detective Mark Taylor, a name he hadn't heard in years. "Detective Taylor," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "What are you doing here?" The detective didn't answer right away. Instead, he took a slow, deliberate step inside, his eyes scanning the apartment. "I'm not here for small talk," he said, his voice low. "I need to ask you about something. Something you might know a lot more about than you think." The stranger's heart skipped a beat. What could Taylor possibly be referring to? The detective had been involved in an investigation years ago, an investigation into a series of disappearances that had shaken the local community. They had never caught the person responsible, and the case had gone cold. But the stranger had always suspected there was more to it, that the authorities had missed something. Could this be about that case? Or was it connected to the events that had unfolded today? "What are you talking about?" the stranger asked, trying to keep his voice calm despite the rising anxiety in his chest. Taylor didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pulled something from his coat pocket, a small, worn photograph. He handed it to the stranger, and as the stranger took it in his hands, his breath caught. The photo was old, faded at the edges, but it was unmistakable. It was a picture of a young man, standing in front of a grave, his face partially obscured by the shadow of a tree. The grave was eerily familiar. He had seen it earlier that day. It was the same military grave, the one that had been disrespected by the teens. "This is a picture from a few years ago," Taylor said, his voice tinged with something the stranger couldn't quite place. "Do you recognize the man in the photo? I need to know if you've ever seen him before. If you know anything about him, or his connection to the cemetery." The stranger's mind raced. He had never seen this photo before. The man in it looked vaguely familiar, but why would someone have taken a picture in front of that grave, years before it had even become the focal point of today's events? And why was Taylor bringing it to him now? Was this connected to the mysterious keychain? To Rachel's message? Was there a deeper link between the events unfolding around him, his family, and the case Taylor had been investigating all those years ago? Before he could respond, the detective gave him one last piercing look. "I don't know if you're involved in this, but I need you to be careful. There are people who don't want this case to be reopened. People who will do anything to keep the truth buried." The stranger's pulse quickened. The walls seemed to close in around him. Had the mystery just become even more dangerous? Was he in over his head? And what role did his family, especially James, play in all of this? His grip tightened around the photograph, but before he could ask another question, Detective Taylor turned and left, leaving him with more questions than answers. What was the detective really after? And what had just been uncovered that was more dangerous than he could have ever imagined? The mystery deepened, and the stakes were higher than ever. The night seemed to close in around the stranger, pressing down on him like a suffocating weight. He had barely had time to process the unsettling conversation with Detective Taylor when his phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Rachel. The text read, "James is gone. Please come home. He's not here, and I don't know what's happening. I'm scared." His heart dropped into his stomach.
Gone.
His son, his only son, had disappeared just like that. No explanation, no warning. The pit in his chest grew wider, and the world around him felt suddenly unreal, like he was watching it from a distance. This wasn't just some random disappearance. This was connected to everything that had been unfolding since that fateful day in the cemetery. His mind was spinning, each thought colliding with the next, leaving him with no clear direction. He could feel the hairs on the back of his neck standing up. The strange voice in the cemetery, the cryptic warnings from Detective Taylor, the mysterious keychain, all of it was swirling together, forming a picture that made his stomach churn. The more he tried to make sense of it, the more the pieces didn't fit. Someone was pulling the strings, someone who wanted him to stay in the dark, someone who would stop at nothing to keep him from uncovering the truth. He grabbed his coat and rushed out of the apartment, his hands trembling. The cold night air slapped him in the face as he stepped into the street, his mind only focused on getting to Rachel's house. His thoughts were consumed by fear. Fear for his son. Fear for himself. Fear that this was only the beginning of something much darker than he could have ever imagined. As he sped through the quiet streets, every passing car seemed like a potential threat, every shadow a hidden danger. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched, that someone was following him, trailing just out of sight. His eyes darted to the rearview mirror constantly, but he saw nothing. And yet, the sensation of being pursued, of being cornered, was growing stronger with every mile. He turned onto the street where Rachel lived, his heart pounding louder now. The house was dark, all the lights off, save for the dim glow of a street lamp outside. His footsteps echoed in the stillness as he rushed to the door and rang the bell. No answer. He knocked again, harder this time, the fear clawing at his chest. Where was she? Where was James? He tried the doorknob, only to find it unlocked. Cautiously, he stepped inside, calling out for Rachel, his voice trembling with a mixture of hope and dread. But there was no response, no sound of movement. The silence in the house was suffocating, the kind of silence that made every creak of the floorboards seem amplified, as if something, or someone, was hiding just out of sight. His heart raced as he moved through the house, checking each room, calling their names. The tension was unbearable, the weight of the unknown pressing down on him with every step. Finally, he reached James' room. The door was slightly ajar, and as he pushed it open, he saw that the bed was empty. No sign of his son. No sign of a struggle. But there was something else, something that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. The room was cold, unnaturally so, and as he stepped inside, he noticed a small, folded note sitting on the desk. It was handwritten, the ink smeared slightly, as though it had been written in a hurry. He unfolded it, his hands shaking, and read the few words scrawled inside. "They know about you. Stay away or you'll lose more than just your son." His breath caught in his throat as the weight of the words settled in. It was a warning, a direct threat. His son wasn't just missing, he had been taken. And whoever was behind this knew everything. They knew about him, about his past, about his connection to this strange mystery, and they were willing to use his son as leverage. Panic surged through him, but along with the panic came a cold, relentless determination. He couldn't back down. He couldn't let them win. He had to find James, no matter the cost. Just as he was about to leave the room, the sound of a car door slamming outside made him freeze. His heart skipped a beat, and his body tensed instinctively. He moved toward the window, trying to peer through the blinds, but the street was still empty. Had someone been watching him from outside? Was there a car parked just out of view? He couldn't tell, but something wasn't right. He could feel it in his gut. His phone buzzed again, this time with a voicemail notification. He quickly grabbed it, holding his breath as he pressed play. The message was from Rachel, but when he heard her voice, it was not the frantic tone he had expected. Instead, her voice was cold, distant, almost robotic. "Get out. Don't come here. They'll find you if you do. It's too late." The words hit him like a punch to the chest. What was going on? Why was she saying this? Was she in danger, too? Or had she somehow been involved in whatever was happening to him and James? The stranger's mind raced, his paranoia growing by the second. He was caught in something much deeper than he realized, and the walls were closing in. He could feel it now, the weight of the danger surrounding him, the gnawing certainty that everything he had believed, everything he thought he knew, was a lie. As he backed away from the window, the shadows around him seemed to deepen. His phone buzzed once more, but this time, the message was a photo. He opened it, his breath catching in his throat as he saw the image. It was a blurry shot of his own reflection in the rearview mirror of his car. But the photo wasn't taken by him. It was taken by someone who had been following him. Someone who knew exactly where he was at that very moment. He slammed the phone down in frustration, his chest tight with fear and anger. The pieces were falling into place, but the puzzle was still incomplete. Who were these people? What did they want from him? And why was his family caught in the middle of all this? The feeling of being watched, of being hunted, was overwhelming now. He couldn't shake the sense that every move he made, every step he took, was being monitored. The mystery that had started in the cemetery was spiraling out of control, and he had no idea where it was leading. But one thing was certain, the stakes were higher than ever, and he was no longer just searching for answers. He was fighting for his life. As the phone buzzed one last time, the stranger felt the crushing weight of the unknown pressing down on him. It was time to make a choice. But whatever decision he made next could be the last one he ever made. Just when the stranger thought he couldn't feel more cornered, the unexpected happened. As he paced back and forth in the darkened living room, trying to make sense of the chaos that had engulfed his life, the front door creaked open. He froze, his pulse quickening, and turned to face the intruder. His mind raced. Could it be Rachel? Had she come back, or was someone else in the house? But the figure that stepped into the room wasn't Rachel. It wasn't anyone he had expected to see. It was Detective Taylor. For a moment, the stranger simply stared, unable to process the sight of the detective standing in his doorway, looking as calm as if they had just met for a casual chat. But this wasn't a casual meeting. Not in the slightest. The detective had been the one person he thought he could trust. After all, she had been the one who had opened the door to the truth, or so he had believed. But now, standing there, Taylor looked different. Her eyes were cold, calculating. The kindness he had once seen in her demeanor had vanished, replaced by something far more unsettling. You're not here to help, are you?" he asked, his voice hoarse, his fear mixing with a growing sense of betrayal. Taylor didn't immediately answer. She simply stepped inside, the door closing quietly behind her. The air in the room seemed to change, thick with tension, as though the very space between them had shifted. She wasn't here as an ally anymore. He could feel it. Something was wrong. Something had changed. The detective was no longer a person he could rely on, and that realization hit him like a ton of bricks. "I'm sorry," she finally said, her voice low and almost regretful. "I never meant for you to get this far." "Get what far?" he demanded, his voice rising in disbelief. "What the hell is going on, Taylor? Where is my son? Where is Rachel? Why are you—" His words faltered, the terror slowly turning into something darker, something far more sinister. "All those questions, all the things you thought you knew," Taylor continued, her gaze unwavering, "they were all lies. There's been a game being played, and you've been a pawn from the very start." The stranger's heart skipped a beat. His brain scrambled to process her words, but they didn't make sense. This couldn't be happening. Taylor had been the one person who had been by his side through it all, through the threats, through the cryptic messages, through the endless questions. And now, It seemed like everything she had told him was part of some larger, more twisted scheme. "I don't understand," he muttered, his voice barely a whisper as his mind reeled. "You were helping me. You were supposed to be helping me find my son." "You were never supposed to find him," Taylor said, her voice steady, the emotion now completely absent. "The people who took your son." She paused for a fraction of a second, her eyes flickering with something he couldn't place, before continuing. "They're the ones who put you on this path. They've been watching you for years, and they knew you'd come looking for answers. They knew you'd make it this far, and now they're going to take everything from you." He stumbled back, the words crashing into him like a freight train. This wasn't just a kidnapping, it wasn't just about his son. There was something much bigger at play, something he had never been prepared for. The detective wasn't his ally. She was part of the larger plan, part of the very conspiracy that had been pulling the strings behind everything. He took a step back, his mind reeling. But why? Why me? Why my family? "Because you're the key," Taylor said, her voice cold, her eyes locking onto his. "You and your son are connected to something bigger than you could ever imagine. You've always been part of this story, even before you knew it. And now that you're this close to the truth, you're a threat to everything they've worked for." His head was spinning. What did she mean, connected? He hadn't been part of any conspiracy. He was just a regular man, a father searching for his missing son. But it was clear now that nothing was as it seemed. The more he tried to understand, the more the pieces of the puzzle refused to fit together. "You know who I am," the stranger said slowly, "but you still haven't told me why this is happening. What do they want from me? What is it that they're willing to destroy everything for?" The detective didn't hesitate. "They want control, power. And your son, he's more important than you realize." The stranger felt as if the ground beneath him had shifted. This wasn't just about revenge or ransom, it was something far more sinister. Something that had been set in motion long before he ever knew his family was in danger. Taylor took a step closer, her eyes now filled with an unreadable emotion. "You have no idea who you're really up against," she said, her voice lowering to a dangerous whisper. "And by the time you figure it out, it'll be too late." The stranger's pulse quickened as her words sunk in. It wasn't just the people who had taken his son he had to worry about. It was everyone around him. And as the pieces continued to fall into place, a horrible realization dawned. The threat wasn't just from an outside force, it was coming from within. Everything he had believed was unraveling. And now, the one person he had trusted most was the one who had orchestrated his downfall. His entire world had been turned upside down, and in that moment, he understood just how deeply the trap had been set. He was being manipulated, no, controlled, by people whose names he didn't even know. He had no idea what he was truly fighting against. And as Taylor turned to leave, he realized the worst part. He was no longer the one in control of his own fate. The next few days were a blur. Every moment was filled with a sense of impending dread, like a storm just on the horizon, ready to break. The stranger couldn't escape the gnawing feeling that everything he had known, every relationship he had trusted, was now on the line. Every time he looked at someone, he questioned their motives. Was Rachel really the victim she appeared to be, or was she somehow tangled in the web of lies that had ensnared him? Was the detective's betrayal the only one he had to worry about, or was there something much darker lurking closer to home? It wasn't until that fateful night that the full weight of his situation hit him, forcing him into an impossible position. He had gone to the one place he thought would offer him some solace, his father's house. But even there, he couldn't escape the haunting feeling that there were eyes on him, that someone was watching his every move. The old house felt different, somehow colder than it ever had. The once comforting walls now seemed like a cage, and as he sat in the living room, staring at the faint glow of the fireplace, he realized just how isolated he truly was. His father entered quietly, as he always did. A tall, strong man in his mid-60s, he had always been someone the stranger could turn to for advice, someone who had weathered his own fair share of challenges. But tonight, there was something off about him, something unsettling in the way he avoided eye contact. The stranger's heart sank. He had never seen his father like this before, so distant, so cold. And then, without warning, his father spoke. "I know you've been digging around." His father's voice broke through the silence, his tone low, almost as if he were trying to avoid drawing attention. "And I know you're close to finding out things you're not supposed to." The stranger felt a jolt of shock shoot through his chest. He had been cautious, careful about what he said and who he trusted, but somehow his father knew. He couldn't hide anymore. "What do you mean?" the stranger asked, the words heavy in his mouth, though he feared he already knew the answer. His father hesitated, his eyes clouded with a mix of regret and fear. "There's no easy way to say this, son. But you've been in over your head from the start. It's not just about Rachel anymore. It's not just about your son. There are people involved in this that we can't escape, people who would do anything to make sure the truth never sees the light of day." The words hit like a slap to the face. The stranger couldn't believe what he was hearing. His father had known more than he had let on, had been hiding things from him for years. "You knew? You knew all this time and didn't say anything." The betrayal was sharp, cutting into his chest like a blade. His father's face twisted with guilt, but his expression was unreadable. There was a heaviness in the room, a secret that neither of them could ignore. "I didn't want to drag you into this, son. I didn't want you to be part of this mess," his father said, his voice low. "But the truth is, there's no way out anymore. The people after you won't stop. And if you keep digging, if you keep pushing forward, they'll come for you. They'll come for everything you care about." The stranger's mind was reeling, everything he thought he understood about his family unraveling in a single moment. His father wasn't just a victim in this, he was a participant. He had been hiding something critical that could change everything. The weight of his father's admission pressed down on him, and he couldn't help but feel betrayed. His entire life, he had relied on this man, trusted him implicitly. And now, it felt like the floor was giving way beneath him. But before he could respond, before he could fully process the revelation, his phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, half expecting more cryptic messages, more threats. But this time, it wasn't a message from the people hunting him down. It was a call from Rachel. His pulse raced as he answered, desperate for any kind of clarity, even if he knew, deep down, that nothing would make sense anymore. "Listen to me carefully." Rachel's voice came through, shaky and urgent. "They're watching us. All of us. And I think I know who's behind it all. I've seen things, heard things that connect everything. The people who took your son, they've been controlling things for a long time. Your father, he's been involved in it. I don't know how far this goes, but you can't trust anyone anymore." The stranger felt the room close in around him. Rachel knew more than she had let on, and the fear in her voice made everything seem that much more real. He had always believed his family was in danger, but now he realized just how far the danger extended. He had been blind, trusting people who had been keeping secrets from him. There was no clear path forward, only a labyrinth of lies and betrayal. But then Rachel's voice broke through the haze, her words sharp, filled with the kind of urgency that made the stranger's heart stop in his chest. "I need you to make a decision. They're offering you a deal. A choice. You can either save yourself, or you can go after the truth. But know this, you can't have both. The truth will destroy you. It will destroy everything. But if you choose safety, you'll never know what really happened. You'll never know the full extent of the lies." The ultimatum hung in the air, like a dark cloud. The stranger's head swam with the weight of it. He had come this far, fought so hard, but now he was faced with the most impossible choice of all. His heart pounded in his chest. Should he go after the truth, knowing that it could tear apart everything he held dear? Or should he walk away, leaving the darkness behind and taking the safety that Rachel promised? Either way, there was no turning back. As he stood there, the weight of his decision pressing down on him, his father's voice came again, this time more insistent. "You need to decide, son. You're running out of time. If you keep pushing, if you keep digging, they'll come for us all. I'll be damned if I lose you too." The stranger's mind raced. His world had been flipped upside down, and now, with everything on the line, the hardest decision of his life loomed before him. What was the right choice? The The truth could shatter everything he knew, but living with the lie could destroy him just the same. The pressure was suffocating. The stranger could feel the walls closing in on him, each breath heavier than the last as his thoughts scrambled to make sense of the impossible situation he now found himself in. He thought he had been digging into something small, isolated, a few twisted people trying to keep a secret. But the truth was far darker, far more widespread than he had ever imagined. And as the days ticked by, he realized just how deep the rabbit hole went, how many lives were already entangled in this web of lies and deceit. Rachel's warning echoed in his mind, but even now, the weight of her words didn't quite hit him until he started connecting the dots. He had trusted people, relied on them for answers, for guidance. And now, as he pieced everything together, he realized just how wrong he had been about those closest to him. His father wasn't just involved, he was a key player in this conspiracy. But even more shocking was the discovery that Rachel, the woman he thought he could count on, was playing a much bigger game than he ever knew. It started with a call that felt like the last straw. His phone rang late one night, an unknown number flashing on the screen. It was her again, but this time, her voice was different, urgent, trembling with fear, as if she had seen the very thing she had been warning him about.
"You have to get out of there. Right now.
They're coming for you. All of you. And I'm not sure I can stop them anymore." His heart raced, the weight of her words sinking in with terrifying clarity. It wasn't just about him anymore. This wasn't just some isolated incident that could be solved by exposing a few bad actors. No, this was something much larger, something far more insidious. The people who had been pulling the strings weren't just targeting him. They were targeting anyone who could uncover their secrets. His family, Rachel, even innocent bystanders. None of them were safe. His head spun as he realized the scale of the conspiracy. This wasn't just about some dirty deal gone wrong or a few corrupt individuals trying to cover their tracks. It was much bigger. Powerful people with connections spanning across law enforcement, politics, and even the very systems meant to protect citizens. This was the real power structure he was up against. And he was standing at the center of it, unknowingly playing his part in something far larger than he could have ever imagined. But it wasn't just the conspiracy that was starting to break him. It was the people he had trusted most, his own flesh and blood, who were now the ones standing in his way. His father, the man he had looked up to his entire life, had been at the heart of it all, orchestrating things from the shadows. Everything he had been told, everything he had believed, had been a lie. It was a betrayal so deep, it threatened to destroy everything he had ever known. And as he confronted his father one final time, the full weight of the situation crashed down on him. "You never told me, did you?" His voice was a mix of anger, confusion, and heartbreak. "You've been part of this all along.
You've been protecting them.
All these years." His father's face twisted, guilt and regret etched into every line of his features. "I didn't want you to know.
I didn't want you to be dragged into this.
I try to keep you out of it, but it's too late now. They're too powerful, too dangerous. If you keep pushing, if you keep looking for answers, they'll come for you. They'll come for us all." The stranger's mind raced, panic rising in his chest. His father was right, he was in too deep. But even as the fear threatened to swallow him whole, there was something else. Something darker, something more sinister lurking behind his father's words. He wasn't just warning him out of concern, he was protecting himself, his own interests. The man who had once been his hero was now nothing more than a puppet in a game he had no control over. And the worst part? He had helped build the damn game. Everything started to crumble around him. The truths he had uncovered, the pieces he thought he had put together, all began to unravel. There was a new twist, a new betrayal that hit him like a punch to the gut. Rachel, the woman he had trusted to help him through this mess, was part of the conspiracy too. She wasn't some innocent bystander. She had been working with them from the very start, feeding him just enough information to keep him digging, to keep him on their trail while they covered their tracks. The lies, the half-truths, it was all a manipulation to keep him going down a path that would only lead to one thing, his downfall. "I never wanted to hurt you." Rachel's voice trembled through the phone, guilt lacing every word. But I had no choice.
I was forced into this.
I had to play the game. And now it's too late. They're coming for you. For all of us. And I can't stop them anymore. The weight of her betrayal was a punch to the stomach. The woman he had believed in, the one he had fought beside, had been playing him all along. And now, as the truth began to surface, he realized just how much he had been lied to. The conspiracy wasn't just about his family or his father, it was bigger than that. Bigger than anything he had ever dreamed. He was a pawn in a much larger game, and every step he took only brought him closer to a dark, terrifying truth. He had to make a decision, but there was no way out. There was no easy answer. Every move he made was being watched. Every person he thought he could trust was either lying to him or had their own agenda. The danger wasn't just physical anymore, it was psychological, emotional. It was a war of manipulation, and he had no idea how deep it went. How far they were willing to go to protect the secrets they had spent decades building. But the real question was, how much was he willing to lose to expose it all? How far would he go before he lost himself completely in the process? As the stakes grew higher and the danger more imminent, he realized that no matter what happened, there was no turning back. The only way out was to face the darkness head-on, but even that might not be enough to save him. The stranger stood at the edge of the abandoned warehouse, his heart racing with a mixture of fear and anticipation. Every instinct told him to turn around, to run as fast and as far as he could from this nightmare, but he couldn't. Not now. Not when he was so close to the truth. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place one by one, and he could see the final image emerging in his mind, blurry yet undeniable. He was standing in the very heart of the conspiracy, and he was about to confront the people who had been controlling everything from the shadows. Behind him, the sound of footsteps echoed in the empty space, slow, deliberate. He turned, his eyes locking on the figure emerging from the darkness. It was Rachel, the last person he expected to see here, yet somehow the only one who had been able to lead him this far. The betrayal burned in his chest as he watched her approach, her face a mixture of regret and determination. "I told you to stop," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the vast emptiness of the room. "I told you to walk away before it was too late. But you didn't listen. Now look at what you've done." He clenched his fists, the anger rising within him. "You've been lying to me this whole time, Rachel. Everything. You've been playing me from the start. How could you do this? How could you pretend to be on my side?" Rachel's gaze dropped to the floor, her shoulders sagging in defeat. "It wasn't supposed to be like this. I never wanted to hurt you. I never wanted any of this. But they don't leave you a choice. Once you're in, there's no getting out. They have too much power, too much leverage." She looked up at him, her eyes filled with unshed tears. "I didn't have a choice." The weight of her words hit him like a ton of bricks, and for a moment, the anger ebbed away, replaced by the crushing realization that she wasn't the only one trapped in this web. The people pulling the strings were everywhere, and they would stop at nothing to maintain their control. This wasn't just about him anymore, it was about something much bigger, something far more dangerous than he could have ever imagined. Before he could respond, a new voice broke through the tension, cold and menacing. "You should have listened to her." From the shadows emerged a figure he knew all too well, his father. The man who had once been his hero, the one person he had trusted above all others. The same man who had been at the center of this entire conspiracy, pulling the strings behind the scenes. But now, as he stood there, his eyes cold and devoid of any trace of the father he had once known, the stranger realized just how far the man was willing to go to protect his own secrets. "You," the stranger spat, taking a step toward him, the betrayal and anger in his voice undeniable. "You've been part of this the whole time. All these years, you've been lying to me.
You've been protecting them.
And for what? Power?
Money?
What could possibly make you do this?" His father didn't flinch. "It's not about what I want," he said, his voice steady, almost detached. "It's about survival. They don't just control everything. They own everything. And you've been a part of this whether you knew it or not. You've been working for them all along." The words hit the stranger like a punch to the gut. The truth was even worse than he had imagined. The people who had been behind everything, the ones who had been orchestrating the lies, the manipulations, and the power plays, his own father had been one of them. He wasn't just a victim of this conspiracy. He had been a willing participant. As the weight of the truth settled over him, his father stepped closer, the darkness in his eyes growing more intense. "You don't understand. This isn't just about us anymore. They're watching. They know everything. And if you keep pushing, if you keep digging, you'll never be able to stop them. They'll make sure of that." The stranger's heart pounded in his chest, his thoughts spinning out of control. He had to make a choice. A decision that would either save him or seal his fate forever. But before he could respond, a sharp sound cut through the air, the sound of a gun cocking. He turned, his breath catching in his throat as he saw the figure standing behind him, just a few steps away. It was Rachel. "No," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I never wanted it to go this far. But I couldn't let you destroy everything. I couldn't let you ruin all the work we've done." The stranger felt the world shift beneath his feet. The betrayal from Rachel was a gut-wrenching blow, but this was something else entirely. She wasn't just trying to keep him safe. She wasn't just trying to protect herself. She had been playing him this entire time. And now, she was holding the weapon, her finger on the trigger, ready to end it all. "I'm sorry," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "But you have to understand, this is the only way." The stranger's mind raced, his heart thundering in his chest. His breath came in short gasps as he realized just how deep the conspiracy went, and how far his father, Rachel, and everyone else had gone to protect it. He had been a pawn, a small piece in a much larger game. And now, he was about to pay the ultimate price for trying to expose it all. But just as the tension reached its breaking point, something unexpected happened. A loud crash echoed through the warehouse, followed by the unmistakable sound of shuffling footsteps. From the darkness, a figure emerged, a man dressed in black, his face hidden behind a mask. Without warning, he lunged at Rachel, knocking the gun from her hand and sending her crashing to the ground. The stranger barely had time to process what was happening before the man was standing in front of him, holding out a small, crumpled piece of paper. "I don't have much time," the man said, his voice low and urgent. "But you need to see this. It's the final piece. The one thing they've been hiding from you." The stranger took the paper, his hands shaking as he unfolded it. What he saw on the paper made his blood run cold: a name, an address, and a date. The final clue. The missing link that tied everything together. Before he could ask any questions, the man turned and disappeared into the shadows, leaving the stranger standing there, holding the key to everything he had been searching for. And as the weight of the revelation hit him, he realized just how much danger he was truly in. The conspiracy was bigger than he had ever imagined, and now there was no turning back. The truth was out there, waiting to be uncovered. But the question was, who would make it out alive to tell the story? The warehouse was silent now, the echoes of chaos from just moments ago lingering in the air like an aftershock. The stranger stood in the center of it all, the crumpled piece of paper still clutched tightly in his hand. His body ached, his heart heavy with everything he had just uncovered, but there was no relief, no moment of triumph. The man in black had disappeared just as quickly as he had arrived, leaving the stranger with nothing but a name, an address, and a final, haunting question. What now? He glanced down at the paper again, as though the truth might suddenly become clearer if he stared long enough. But it didn't. The name, the address, the date, it was just a reminder of how deep this rabbit hole went. How many lives had been torn apart, how many people had been hurt in the wake of this conspiracy. His own life, once so simple, was now a twisted mess of deception, betrayal, and secrets. There was no going back. But even as the weight of the truth settled over him, he realized something else. He had no more answers. The final piece had fallen into place, but it only opened up a new chapter. The people behind all of this, his father, Rachel, and everyone else who had been involved, they were still out there, still in control. And he knew, deep down, that there was no escaping them.
Not now. Not ever.
As he walked away from the wreckage of the warehouse, the sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft, golden light across the city. It should have been a moment of peace, of reflection. But the stranger felt none of it. The city, once a place of comfort, now felt like a cage. Every corner, every street, every face was a reminder of the life he had lost and the future he could never return to. He was a man in exile, hunted by the very people who had shaped his existence. But even in the depths of his despair, there was a flicker of something else, something that kept him moving forward. It wasn't hope, not exactly. It was a sense of purpose. The final piece of the puzzle may have opened up more questions, but it had also given him one undeniable truth. He couldn't let this go. He couldn't let them win. The road ahead was uncertain, the stakes higher than ever before, but for the first time in a long time, the stranger knew what he had to do. He had to expose them. He had to take down the people who had controlled his life for so long. And though it felt like an impossible task, though he knew the dangers that lay ahead, he couldn't stop now. There was no turning back. As the stranger disappeared into the early morning haze, the camera lingered on the empty warehouse, a silent witness to the events that had unfolded. The mysteries, the betrayals, the secrets, it was all just the beginning. There was more to this story, more to uncover. And even though the stranger's path was unclear, one thing was certain. He wasn't alone. The fight wasn't over. It was only just beginning. And in the distance a shadow moved, watching, waiting. The story wasn't finished yet.